Welcome back to Doctrine Forensics. In recent days, John Lewis has been heralded by the Christian community, particularly those in the woke Baptist circles, as a great American hero worthy of Christian praise. From the Southern Baptist Convention to the Gospel Coalition, the man has received nonstop accolades from the likes of Joe Carter, who gave us an endless slew of reasons to celebrate the pro-abortion, pro-gay, God-hating politician, and William Thornton of SBC Voices, who is also calling for a statue of the man to be placed in the U.S. Capitol. Well, a woke Baptist pastor compared John Lewis to Jesus and said that he died for our sins. Well, who do we have to thank for this information? Our friends over at Reformation Charlotte, Jeff Maples, penned an article on July 31st and a video clip that shows that people are liking John Lewis and his accomplishment to the saving power of Jesus Christ. It is absolute blasphemy. Well, we're going to get into this woke article in just a second. Now, John Lewis passed away in July 2020, and grandstanders have failed to mention about John Lewis and his God-hating promotion of gay rights, which isn't civil rights but LGBTQ indoctrination, and his relentless push for expanding abortion. Now, anytime you talk about someone who went through the civil rights movement, you have conflict and kickback. And most people will kick back because, one, as a black American, I do not subscribe to being called an African American. I am not from Africa. I was born in America. Therefore, I am a black American, so they say. Well, I would also like to take a second to address another issue. Black, white, and gray are not colors, they are shades. So if you can get where I'm going is, it's easy to label somebody with a particular group of people based upon their shade of color, but as Christians, this is something we should not be doing. Black people in black churches create a powerful black voice in our country, but what's so startling is so many black pastors are spiritually irresponsible and blasphemous. Watch this.
We celebrate John Lewis. He was wounded for America's transgressions, bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. So let's remember him today, and let's recommit tomorrow to standing together and fighting together and voting together and standing up on behalf of truth and righteousness together.
Now, here's what the National Abortion Federation writes about John Lewis and his leftist politics. Quote, Representative John Lewis was a hero, a man of courage, conviction, and wisdom, an unrelenting champion of civil rights, racial justice, women's rights, and abortion rights, an exemplar who never gave up the hope for a more just country that would be a positive force for a better world. And in 1966, John Lewis delivered a passionate and rousing speech against the Defense of Marriage Act. Stating that this bill is a slap in the face of the Declaration of Independence. It denies gay men and women the right to liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Marriage is a basic human right. So at John Lewis's funeral, Barack Obama used his time for a eulogy to give a campaign speech for Democrats and the state of sanctioned voter fraud. Lewis's pastor, Reverend Raphael Warnock, the senior pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, took his accolades of Lewis to a level of blasphemy by comparing him to Jesus himself.
We celebrate John Lewis. He was wounded for America's transgressions, bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. So let's remember him today, and let's recommit tomorrow to standing together and fighting together and voting together and standing up on behalf of truth and righteousness.
That statement he made is outright rank blasphemy. And if you're a member of the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, it is absolutely time for you to consider finding another place to worship. Jeff Maples also penned an earlier article on July 21st, 2020, that in support of John Lewis, the Gospel Coalition, who celebrates pro-LGBTQ, pro-abortion leftist politician, they have upped the rhetoric. Now, the Gospel Coalition abandoned the gospel long before it became an outlet for progressive politics and anti-gospel rhetoric. The Gospel Coalition is largely a propaganda outlet for loosely affiliated church leaders to come together and promote the woke theology and democratic talking points. The Gospel Coalition is a reliable source for the advancement of such world ideologies such as social justice, intersectionality, and identity politics to the detriment of the actual gospel, and has advocated for a seemingly middle-of-the-road stance on homosexuality that treats same-sex attraction as an ailment rather than a sin, and even, in some cases, treats same-sex relationships and affection as a plausible alternative to biblical marriage, so long as it stops short of bodily penetration. All in all, the Gospel Coalition has turned many conservative churches into leftist political activist groups. Joe Carter, former Southern Baptist Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, ERLC, leader, pens an article at the Gospel Coalition celebrating the life of pro-sodomy, pro-abortion, far-left radical politician John Lewis. Now, Reformation Charlotte reported that the group of self-proclaimed conservative Southern Baptists called on the removal of a Confederate statue in the U.S. Capitol to be replaced with the statue of John Lewis, ignoring the fact that practically every single thing Lewis stood for is diametrically opposed to God and Christianity. Carter celebrates Lewis by listing what he believes all the good things that Lewis stood for, which, by the way, is virtually nothing. His article titled 9 Things You Should Know About John Lewis lists, 9 things to include: his birthplace and date, that he preached to chickens, that he attended an American Baptist seminary, that he participated in the Nashville student movement to end racial segregation at lunch counters in Nashville, that he was one of the original 13 Freedom Riders, and that he started freedom schools for blacks only, and that he marched with Martin Luther King Jr., that he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by far-left radical President Obama, and that he spent years pushing for and finally got an African American museum in Washington, D.C. Now, of course, most of the things aren't bad. We can all cherry pick good things that evil people do and bad things that good people do. But what was the point of Carter's post at the Gospel Coalition? And what in the world does that have to do with the gospel? Nothing. And the point of this article is to whitewash far-left politics and politicians so they can get Christians to sympathize with the left. Of course, Christians believe in civil rights. People on all sides of the political spectrum continue to advocate for civil rights, actual, true, real civil rights. But what Carter fails to mention in his 9 things that you should know about the guy is his God-hating promotion of gay rights, which isn't civil rights, but the LGBTQ indoctrination, and his relentless push for expanding abortion, which is ungodly. It's a sad indictment when the National Abortion Federation writes this about you. Representative John Lewis was a hero, a man of courage, conviction, wisdom, an unrelenting champion of civil rights, racial justice, women's rights, and abortion rights. An exemplar who never gave up a hope for a more just country that would be a positive force for a better world. As a believer, I find it terribly disturbing that so many people care more about their shade than they care about the cause of Christ. Now, with a degree of fairness, John Lewis may have started well, but so many people that call themselves Christians start well, and the biggest challenge we have is not how we start, but how we finish. I'm quite sure this video has upset quite a few. I'm not even sure it'll even make it. It may be completely censored. But I want to say one thing. If we are going to uphold the cause of Christ, we need to uphold the cause of Christ and not be concerned about our shade. No man ever has the right to invoke Isaiah 53 on someone else's persona, ever.